Welcome to After the Last Dog, a co-hosted podcast for grooming and pet care business owners who are wearing all the hats and still trying to make the business run smoother behind the scenes. I'm Jennifer Opel. My episodes address the teams and training perspective.
And I'm Dara Forleo. I bring the owner's perspective. We're your hosts. Every week, we will both share an episode to the same business challenge, what's happening, why it keeps happening, and a solution for what you can do next. What hat are you wearing right now?
Hey, welcome back to After the Last Dog. I'm Jennifer Opel. I want to open with a comment I've read on social media that might have been a thought in your head too. It's a question that comes out sounding like something between exhausted and furious. Why can't I find just one good person? One, not a whole team of superstars, just one person you can trust. Maybe a groomer, a front desk person, somebody to keep the schedule moving, somebody that treats the client's dogs the way you treat them yourself. Or do the right work, or maybe just be normal? Here's what's crazy about that question. For those of you who think the answer is always out there, in the job market, in a bad generation of workers, in a labor shortage nobody warned us about, you might be missing a piece of the puzzle. And today, I'm going to tell you something that took me years, real years, of burnout, therapy, and hard, uncomfortable self-examination to figure out. The answer isn't only out there. A big piece of it is inside. In some of the patterns that you and I were never trained to see. It sits quietly underneath every hiring decision we've ever made. So stick with me, because by the end of this episode, you're going to understand your own blind spots a whole lot better. And you're going to walk away with an actual plan for how to hire the right groomer instead of just any warm body who says yes. Let's start with something practical. Because before I get into the deep stuff, I want to give you a tool you can actually use tomorrow morning. When you're making hiring decisions, discipline decisions, or any decisions about how your business runs, you have to find a way to separate your feelings from the task in front of you. Yeah, it does sound simple, but it can be one of the harder things a salon owner learns to do. Because this business is personal to almost every one of us. So here's what I tell my clients. Find a physical or visual cue that flips a switch in your brain from emotional owner to analytical decision maker. It could be a different jacket you put on or a certain chair in your office. It could literally be a corner of the room that you stand in when you need to think like a leader instead of a friend. It doesn't matter what the method is. What matters is that you build a repeatable cue that reminds your brain, this isn't about my feelings right now, this is about the business. Because the moment you can make that shift, you stop being just Jennifer or Susie, reacting to a person you like or feel sorry for, and you start acting like a representative of your company. A representative of the company does something very specific. The representative we're talking about today does HR. Now, think about what a human resources department actually does. Because most of us running a 1 or 2 location grooming salon have never had one. So we've never had to think this through. Google's own HR breakdown lays it out simply by saying recruitment and staffing, training and development, and performance management. Looking at recruitment and staffing, That means finding, screening, interviewing, and hiring qualified candidates. That's where I want to stop. The word qualified is where a lot of salon owners can get stuck. The ones I've talked to are stuck there because they're asking the wrong follow-up question. The follow-up question is not, are they qualified? It's qualified for what? Qualified to be a groomer, sure. But which kind of groomer does your specific business actually need right now? If you want someone who'll be happy with the status quo and won't challenge your systems, you're describing a follower, not a leader. And that's a completely legitimate thing to hire for if that's genuinely what your culture needs. If you want beautiful, high-end, competition quality work, you need someone whose personality leans towards artist, not just technician. Because those are two different mindsets doing the exact same haircut. Now, if you want somebody who stays 5, 10, or more years, you're actually looking for someone who's lifestyle-oriented rather than relentlessly goal-oriented. They're someone who's genuinely content where they are and spends their off hours on leisurely things instead of chasing the next thing. And if you want someone who can grow into a manager role down the line, none of that stuff matters nearly as much as whether they actually have a learning mindset. And they have to be teachable and coachable, and they do actually want to grow. Every single one of those is a different hire. And like in the past as I did, you might be wondering why the person you picked is not working out. Whether their soft skills or hard skills aren't working, they're just not qualified for what you actually need. Okay, I'm going to get vulnerable with you because I changed this podcast 3 times and it kept nagging at me that I should share this. This isn't about a checklist. It's about a blind spot. You cannot see your own blind spots. That's the whole nature of a blind spot. So let me show you mine because I think it'll help you find yours. For most of my career behind the table, I was living with undiagnosed complex PTSD. And one of the ways that showed up was that I stayed in freeze mode. I was stuck there. I avoided conflict at absolutely any cost. When conflict did end up happening, I had 0 tools for it. None. So I would just let resentment and frustration pile up quietly until eventually the relationship, whether it was personal or professional, had to be completely severed. There was no middle ground for me. No difficult conversations, no boundary, no repair, just silence, and then an ending. My healing journey started small, with one boundary at a time, and me practicing being that representative of the company I just described. And that helped, genuinely. But here's what I learned the hard way. It solved my rules and guidelines problem. It did not solve my people problem. Rules can't fix a hiring pattern that's being driven by an unregulated nervous system. The real shift for me happened after a period of burnout that, I'm going to be honest with you here, lasted somewhere close to 2 or 3 years. Not going anywhere, not really socializing, just surviving. And when I finally started the actual healing work, which was re-regulating my nervous system so that I could use my mind consistently instead of reactively, I gained something I did not even know I was missing. my blind spot was discernment. Now I can read patterns much earlier to consciously choose people and walk away from those that don't fit in the right place. I also want to share what I found while I was preparing for this episode, because I think a lot of it is going to land for you too. The first thing that came up again and again was low self-worth or low standards. For some people, it's about self-worth. For me, honestly, it was purely a standards issue. My bar for acceptable human behavior was just set too low. And somebody described it to me once in a way that really stuck. Your subconscious recognizes certain behavior as home cooking because it's familiar, so it feels safe, even when it's bad for you. That's what I've been calling crap fitting. You find a person who, in some other context, is a perfectly fine human being. But when you're hiring for a specific role in a very specific culture, your subconscious will quietly fit that wrong person into the wrong seat because something about them feels like home. And it usually takes a while before you can even name what's off, because your subconscious has spent years training you to overlook exactly that kind of red flag. Relying on written systems and protocols was, for a long time, my only real defense against crap fitting. Because a system doesn't care what feels familiar. A system just checks whether the standard was met. Another thing I found online and immediately recognized in myself was over-responsibility used as a shield. My hard work and overbusy lifestyle was tied directly to my own personal worth. That actually was baked into me as a kid, long before I ever picked up a pair of shears. So there were years, real years, where I could have delegated, where I could have developed someone into a stronger team player. But instead, I stayed behind the table, doing everything myself. Because some part of me needed to prove my worth through effort rather than results. That belief kept me from even looking for delegation opportunities with a clear head. Because that delegation would have meant questioning whether my worth was actually tied to my suffering. It's not, and it never should have been. Here's something that really struck me. The exact same pattern shows up in personal relationships. The setting changes, but the underlying wiring is identical. You've probably heard the advice, accept people as they are. Don't date potential. I've read it and I've heard it. Now, add this in there. Don't hire potential. But when your nervous system is dysregulated into a fight, flight, freeze, or fawn state, you literally cannot recognize the red flags walking through your front door, whether that door leads to your home or your business. Two things made the real difference for me, and both are practical enough to start today. The first was building a clear, if this happens, then that happens trigger into my operating systems. It's essentially a circuit breaker that catches a bad pattern before it spirals. So you're not stuck constantly reacting in real time. That breathing room turned out to be exactly what let me eventually do the deeper work. Whether through self-help, therapy, or coaching, to understand where those patterns actually lived and why they kept resurfacing. The second was building myself an accountability partner and a wider support network. A therapist, a coach, a trusted friend. I had at least one of all three. because a blind spot, by its very nature, cannot be out-strategized alone. That's the whole reason it stays hidden in the first place. For me, that meant devouring everything I could find on complex trauma, following probably a dozen different people on YouTube and actually testing their techniques, keeping what worked and letting go of what didn't. Taking a couple of workshops, sitting through EMDR sessions with a licensed therapist, and slowly and deliberately breaking the cycle of burnout and dysregulation is what I did. I'll drop a link to the few of my favorites in the description. I also want to name scarcity panic because I think almost every grooming salon owner listening right now knows exactly what this feels like. It's the fear of passing up the good enough candidate because you're terrified nobody better is coming. So as my discernment grew, I got a lot better at telling the difference between a good enough employee and an actual good fit employee. And that distinction alone changed how I hire. Now, for our pet grooming industry, there's a couple more patterns that are worth visiting. One is raw output. Somebody can plow through a full schedule of dogs in a day, turn out finished work that looks stunning in photos, or have every client walking out the door singing their praises. And none of that actually tells you whether they're right for your culture, your systems, or the specific seat you're trying to fill. The maverick pattern is real too, and I see it constantly in other owners' complaints in some of the Facebook groups. It's where confidence gets mistaken for competence. Somebody that interviews great, radiates that self-assurance, and gets hired on that energy alone. That's when the actual skill or the accountability underneath it just isn't there. And then there's the I can fix it trap, where we can talk ourselves into believing that a bad attitude or a broken work ethic can be trained right out of somebody. I'll be honest, because I run high accountability, I rarely fall into that one myself. When I would crap fit someone, it would take me at the most 6 months to draw the line and disconnect completely. But if you catch yourself thinking, hey, we can train this in, hey, we can train this out, I want you to sit with the real math first and ask yourself how much time that's actually going to take, how much it's going to cost you in redone work and client complaints, and how many times you're going to have to redo that work before you're willing to admit it isn't working. And this conversation is exactly why I built the Hiring and Onboarding Masterclass. Because knowing your blind spot is step one. But you still need an actual repeatable system standing between your subconscious and your next hire. The masterclass walks you through building the job description around the right qualified leader or follower, artist or technician, lifestyle or growth track. And it gives you the screening and onboarding structure that acts like your own personal HR department, so that your next hiring decision isn't riding entirely on gut feeling and scarcity panic. I'll leave a link with 25% off in the show notes, because this is genuinely the fastest way I know to short circuit the crap fitting before it costs you another 6 months. So in conclusion, if you've been asking yourself why you can't find just one good person, I want you to walk away from this episode holding two truths at the same time. Yes, there's a real skills shortage in the industry. And yeah, some candidates genuinely are unqualified. But underneath all that, there's possibly a pattern in you that could be low standards, over responsibility, scarcity panic, or crap fitting. And that pattern could quietly be steering who gets hired and who gets shown the door. The good news is that pattern is not permanent. I know that firsthand because I lived on the other side of it for years. Stuck in freeze mode, unable to name what was wrong, until I finally did the work to regulate, gain discernment, and to build real systems around my hiring instead of relying on my broken instincts alone. Start small this week. Practice that mindset shift, whatever your version of the different jacket is. Do this before your next hard conversation and get honest about what qualified actually means for the specific seat you're trying to fill. And if you're ready for the full framework, go grab the Hiring and Onboarding Masterclass with your discount code, or book a call with me directly. Links in the show notes either way. You deserve a team that you can trust enough to actually take a day off. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time on After the Last Dog. That's it for today's episode of After the Last Dog. Take the action step from today and use it where it fits your business this week. You can find more support and resources at growinggroomers.com or through the links in the show notes. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time after the last dog goes home.